She turned down Harvard and Yale, earned a real PhD in neuroscience, played a scientist on one of the biggest TV shows in history, then lost one of the most coveted hosting jobs on television while raising 2 children as a single mother. Most people would call that an extraordinary life. But that's not why people are talking about Mayim Bialik today. What caught everyone's attention was a deeply personal essay she published in 2025. Not because it was shocking, not because it was controversial, but because nobody expected someone whose entire public identity was built around science and evidence to share a story like this. And once you understand what happened, you'll see why it resonated with so many people. In June 2025, Mayim Bialik published an essay describing a difficult medical experience that left her questioning assumptions she had long trusted. Following advice from her doctors, she agreed to try a low-dose GLP-1 medication, the same class of drugs that had become one of the biggest health conversations in America. Because of her history with Graves' disease, her medical team believed it was worth exploring. What happened next caught her completely off guard. She described severe digestive distress, painful cramping, bloating, and an inability to keep down even small amounts of water. The symptoms became so intense that normal daily life became difficult. For someone who had spent years studying the human body and building a career around science-based thinking, the experience felt especially unsettling. But here's what made her essay spread so quickly. She wasn't trying to warn people away from the medication. In fact, she acknowledged that these drugs had helped many people. Instead, she focused on something she felt was missing from the conversation: the stories of people who experienced serious side effects and felt invisible in a sea of success stories. That message struck a nerve. This wasn't a celebrity complaining about a trend. This was a neuroscientist saying that even well-studied treatments don't work the same way for everyone. Sometimes people become the exception. And sometimes the system struggles to make room for those exceptions. To understand why her words carried so much weight, you have to look at the path that brought her there. Mayim Bialik was never a typical Hollywood success story. She began appearing on television as a child and became a household name during the early 1990s when she starred in the sitcom Blossom. While many young stars embraced fame, magazine covers, and celebrity culture, Mayim stood out for a different reason. She was obsessed with learning. People who worked with her often remembered seeing her reading academic material between takes instead of entertainment magazines. Education wasn't something she treated as a backup plan. It was central to who she was. That became clear when she reached one of the biggest crossroads of her life. At 17, she received acceptance letters from both Harvard and Yale. Most students would have considered that the opportunity of a lifetime. But Mayim surprised everyone by turning both schools down. Why would someone reject 2 of the most prestigious universities in the world? Her answer revealed a lot about her priorities. She wanted to stay close to her family in California while continuing to pursue both science and acting. So she enrolled at UCLA instead, creating her own path rather than following the one everyone expected. And she took that path seriously. She didn't treat college as something to do between acting jobs. She immersed herself in it. Years later, in 2007, she completed a PhD in neuroscience. Her research focused on brain activity in people with Prader-Willi syndrome, a complex genetic disorder. It was demanding, legitimate academic work that required years of study and research. Then she did something almost nobody expected. Instead of staying in academia, she returned to television. That decision led to the role that changed everything. In 2010, Mayim joined The Big Bang Theory as Amy Farrah Fowler. The casting seemed almost too perfect. A real neuroscientist was now playing a neuroscientist on one of television's most successful shows. Audiences loved it. Amy quickly became a fan favorite, and Mayim earned multiple Emmy nominations for the role. For years, she was one of the most recognizable faces on television. But with greater visibility came greater scrutiny. And that's where things started getting complicated. In 2012, she published a parenting book called Beyond the Sling, explaining her support for attachment parenting. The book discussed practices like extended breastfeeding, co-sleeping, and baby wearing. The reaction was immediate. Some readers praised her honesty and commitment to her beliefs. Others viewed her ideas as extreme. The debate quickly became emotional and personal. Mayim didn't back away from her opinions. She continued discussing them publicly, which gradually created a new challenge. The more she spoke with confidence, the more some people interpreted that confidence as arrogance. It became a pattern that would follow her for years. Then another major life change arrived. Her marriage to Michael Stone ended after nearly a decade together. The divorce became public while she was still balancing a demanding television career and raising 2 sons. She later spoke about the emotional and practical challenges of navigating that period while maintaining a public image. The pressure was immense. And as public perception hardened, a simplified version of Mayim Bialik began to emerge in the media. Intelligent, opinionated, difficult. Whether that image was fair or not, it was becoming part of her story. Then came the controversy that would change everything. In 2017, during the height of the #MeToo movement, Mayim wrote an opinion piece reflecting on her experiences growing up in Hollywood. She discussed how she often felt overlooked because she didn't fit traditional standards of beauty, and described personal choices she believed had helped her avoid certain situations within the industry. Her intentions may have been sincere, but many readers interpreted her words differently. Critics argued that parts of the essay sounded as though she was suggesting women could protect themselves from harassment through their behavior, appearance, or choices. The backlash was immediate and intense. Social media erupted. News outlets covered the controversy. The phrase victim blaming appeared repeatedly. Mayim apologized and clarified her intentions. She acknowledged the hurt her words had caused, and said she never meant to imply that victims were responsible for what happened to them. But by then, the damage had already been done. Years later, that controversy would still be attached to her name. For someone who had spent decades building credibility through education and thoughtful discussion, it was a painful experience. One essay, written during an emotionally charged moment in history, altered public perceptions in ways she couldn't fully control. Then an unexpected opportunity arrived. In 2021, Jeopardy was searching for a future after the death of the legendary host, Alex Trebek. Following months of guest host auditions, producers announced that Ken Jennings and Mayim Bialik would share hosting duties. It should have been a career triumph. Instead, it became another source of controversy. Some longtime fans immediately questioned whether she was the right choice. Online criticism appeared before she had even settled into the role. Every episode was analyzed. Every mistake was discussed. Every comparison to Ken Jennings seemed to spark another debate. Part of the criticism centered on experience. Hosting a fast-paced game show requires a unique skill set, and Mayim was learning under intense public scrutiny. But many observers felt that the reaction went beyond performance. Old controversies resurfaced. Past disagreements returned. Public opinions that had formed years earlier continued to shape how people viewed her. Then the Writers Guild strike changed everything. When writers went on strike in 2023, Mayim chose not to continue hosting during the labor dispute. She described the decision as a matter of principle. The choice came with consequences. Later that year, Sony announced that her hosting contract would not be renewed. Ken Jennings would become Jeopardy's sole permanent host. Just like that, one of the most visible jobs on television was gone. For many people, it looked like a public rejection. A verdict on her entire second act. But what happened afterward may be the most important chapter of all. Instead of scrambling for another television role, Mayim focused on building something she fully controlled. Her podcast, Bialik's Breakdown, became a major priority. The show featured conversations about psychology, neuroscience, mental health, and personal growth. It developed its own audience. And those listeners weren't tuning in because of Blossom or The Big Bang Theory. They were listening because of her perspective. She became increasingly open about her own struggles, discussing depression, anxiety, single parenthood, and the lingering effects of public controversy. Those conversations connected with people in a different way than acting ever had. Listeners weren't looking for perfection. They were looking for honesty. Around the same time, she directed her first feature film, As They Made Us. The story explored grief, family conflict, and complicated relationships. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it demonstrated something important. Mayim's creative voice extended beyond acting. She could tell stories behind the camera as well. As the years passed, a clear pattern emerged. She wasn't trying to rebuild the exact career she once had. She was creating something new. A career that didn't depend on a network executive, a television contract, or public approval. The podcast belonged to her. The films belonged to her. The essays belonged to her. And when she wrote about her experience with GLP-1 medication in 2025, it fit perfectly into that evolution. She had become someone willing to discuss the uncomfortable parts of life, the treatments that don't work, the opinions that draw criticism, the failures that don't come with a neat redemption story. In many ways, every setback in her life came from the same place as her greatest strength. She says what she thinks. Sometimes that has cost her opportunities, money, and public goodwill. But it has also earned her something many public figures never achieve: an audience that trusts her intentions, even when they disagree with her conclusions. The GLP-1 essay reflected that perfectly. She could have kept the experience private. Instead, she shared it because she believed the conversation needed a wider range of voices. She wasn't selling a product. She wasn't promoting an agenda. She was filling what she saw as a gap. And people responded. Perhaps because genuine vulnerability is rare. Or perhaps because hearing a scientist admit uncertainty feels refreshing in a world filled with certainty. There's another detail that makes her story unusual. She didn't reinvent herself in her 20s. She rebuilt in her 40s, carrying decades of public successes, mistakes, and controversies. The internet remembered everything. Every criticism remained searchable. Every difficult moment remained accessible. Yet she kept going. She has spoken openly about the role therapy played in helping her separate her self-worth from public approval. For someone whose identity was deeply connected to intelligence and credibility, learning that lesson wasn't easy. But it appears to have changed her. Today, whether someone agrees with her views or not, her path feels remarkably consistent. She is no longer trying to fit into anyone else's expectations. She isn't trying to be Amy Farrah Fowler. She isn't trying to be the next Alex Trebek. She's writing essays that start conversations. She's directing stories that embrace complexity. She's hosting discussions about mental health, science, and the challenges people rarely discuss publicly. It's not the future most people would have predicted when she was a child star, a sitcom actress, or even a game show host. But maybe that's the point. The most interesting transformations rarely happen the way anyone expects. Sometimes they emerge from disappointment. Sometimes from controversy. Sometimes from losing something you thought you needed. And sometimes they begin the moment you stop trying to win everyone's approval and start building something that belongs entirely to you.